Hello, and welcome to the First Stitch podcast, where we tell the stories of how everyday quilters just like you got started quilting, plus talk about some other fun quilty things along the way. This is your host, Lisa Donnelly from Wild Plum Lane. Let's get started. Today's episode is a good one. We have a quilter story that's full of twists and turns and a very relatable I gave up and then found my way back moment. We also have a WIP finishing tip that's all about binding, including some options that might surprise you. And I'm sharing a tool from my own sewing room that I can't imagine binding without now. Let's get into it. As mentioned, today we get to meet Debbie. Here's what she wrote. Lisa, you asked, so here goes. As a young one, an only girl child, I was fascinated by my mom's sewing ability. She made all my clothes. My dolls all had matching outfits, and I had gorgeous clothes. Unfortunately, in about 5th grade, I was tormented by a schoolyard bully who relentlessly made fun of my homemade clothes. I lost the appreciation for all the beautiful things my mom made. My mom tried so hard to teach me to sew, but she was left-handed and I'm right-handed, and nothing ever clicked. In junior high school, I took a mandatory sewing class, which I hated, where I learned some fundamentals but never appreciated it. I gave up on sewing. Fast forward to retirement, with a couple of nesting years in between where I attempted to sew baby things for my kids. Now retired, I needed something to do. I bought a sewing machine, then upgraded it to include an embroidery machine, then upgraded again to add another sewing machine. I was hooked. I took classes and learned different techniques. I settled on quilting. I don't like sewing clothes, but I enjoy the art of piecing and making a quilt. Now, 4 years into it, I've made maybe a dozen quilts. I'm still learning. Binding is an art I haven't yet mastered. That's the nutshell version of my story. Debbie, here's what I love about your story. Life has a way of circling back to the things we were always meant for. And now here you are, the proud maker of nearly a dozen quilts with a sewing room that has expanded to include multiple machines. I think your mom would be incredibly proud. All right, before we get started on our WIP finishing tip today, I have to admit, binding is actually my favorite part of the quilting process. I know that's probably a controversial take, but for me, it's that last step that takes a quilt top from project to finished, and there's nothing quite like folding that binding over and knowing you are this close to a quilt that's ready to snuggle. That said, I completely understand why binding trips people up. It involves a few steps, it can feel fiddly, and it's that very last thing standing between you and a done quilt, so the stakes feel high. Here's the good news. There are more ways to approach binding than you might think. So let's talk through some options that can help you get that quilt finished, no matter how you feel about binding. Option 1 is to hand stitch to the back. So this is what I do. After machine stitching your binding to the front of the quilt, you fold it over to the back and hand stitch it down with a blind stitch. This is the method many quilters learn first, and it gives you a beautiful, clean finish. It can also be enjoyable once you get into the rhythm. Great TV watching or audiobook listening sewing. One quick tip is that after sewing the binding to the front, use your iron to press it out. Then you just have one fold to make and hold it down while you sew. Keep listening for a tool I love that can help with that. Option 2 is to machine stitch the whole thing. You can absolutely machine stitch your binding from start to finish. It's faster and requires no hand stitching at all. There are even techniques for stitching the ditch binding that keeps the stitching nearly invisible. A finished quilt is a finished quilt, and this method gets you there. If you'd like to learn more, YouTube has some great tutorials you can search for to help you. Option 3 is to send it to a long-arm quilter or a friend. Many long-arm quilters actually offer binding services in addition to quilting. If binding is the one thing standing between you and a finished project, you can absolutely outsource it. This is especially worth considering for a large quilt or a special heirloom project where the stakes feel high. A professional finisher can have that binding done beautifully in a fraction of the time. Option 4 is to make it a social occasion. Here's one of my favorite ideas. Grab a friend or a few and make binding a group activity. Each of you brings a quilt and set up on opposite sides of the same quilt to stitch toward each other. Then switch to the next one. You get the binding done, you get good conversation, and you get the accountability of knowing someone is sitting right across from you, waiting for you to finish your side. Even a simple afternoon of hand stitching over coffee with one quilty friend, you get a quilt off the WIP pile and into the finished column. I did this with my mom to finish my oldest daughter's bed-size quilt in time for Christmas one year, and we had a great time. Speaking of binding, I have a tool to share today that I believe is one of the best things to ever happen to my binding process. And I'm talking about Clover Wonder Clips. When I first started quilting, I didn't use anything to hold my binding in place while I hand stitched the back. I just folded the binding over and held it with my left hand while I stitched with my right. And y'all, my hands would get so tired. I was essentially creating constant tension with my left hand the entire time I was stitching. It worked, but it wasn't comfortable and it definitely slowed me down. Then I had a job where I organized a group of ladies to get together over the lunch hour once a month to work on quilts. Best lunch break idea I ever had, honestly. One day, one of the ladies came in with wonder clips attached to the edge of her quilt to hold her binding in place while she stitched. I remember my jaw literally dropping. I had no idea Wonder Clips even existed or what they were used for. I thought it was so smart, so I went home and ordered a pack that very same evening. Now I can't imagine doing binding without them. When you clip them every few inches along your folded binding, they hold everything perfectly in place, and your hands are completely free to just stitch. No tension, no readjusting, no tired hands. They're a total game changer for hand stitching binding, and incredibly useful for holding seams together while you press, securing bag handles and pockets, and about 100 other quilting tasks I've discovered along the way. I even use mini Wonder Clips for piecing instead of pins a lot of the time. I have a link for you in the show notes. They are very affordable, and if binding has ever felt frustrating or uncomfortable for you, I really think Wonder Clips might change that for you. All right, that's a wrap on episode 9 of the First Stitch podcast. A huge thank you to Debbie for sharing her story and for reminding all of us that the creative things we're meant for have a way of finding us. Until next time, keep stitching, keep making progress, and remember, there's no falling behind in quilting, only moving forward one stitch at a time. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode of the First Stitch podcast. If you enjoyed listening, I'd sure appreciate it if you'd hit the subscribe button in your favorite podcast player, write a review on Apple Podcasts, or tell your best quilty friends so they can listen too.